Thank you for joining me on the Fire Rescue Wellness Podcast. I'm your host, AZ. I find the research and resources and then provide the fire service with the so what, now what, to ensure the health and well-being of every member of our profession. Together, let's thrive. Hello, everyone. This is AZ with the Fire Rescue Wellness Podcast. This is episode number 1, and I am here in Chicago at Fire and Iron Media Studios, home of Chicago's Bravest Stories podcast, and I am in the studio with Vince. Vince, tell the people hello.
Hello, people.
Hello, people. Vince, I met you about a year ago when I was recording the AFFI podcast in studio, but we didn't get a chance to really get much introducing done. So tell me about yourself a little more.
Well, we did meet when you were here with, I think you were doing a health and wellness podcast with AFFI.
I was.
With Luke and Jerry and a cast of others.
No. Jerry did not come in. He was afraid.
He was afraid. I think he took a beating that day too, didn't he?
He did. He did.
Well, yeah, we talked a little bit on your way out, but we do record a podcast called Chicago's Bravest Stories right out of this very studio with my co-hosts Steve and Corey, and we've been very honored to have some amazing guests on our podcast, and to be able to sit down and share these amazing stories with these guys. Some of them we kind of go in not knowing too much about it, and then it just grows into these amazing stories that we could have never hoped to put together on our own. They just came out naturally. And for, you want to talk about health and wellness, I feel, and this is coming from guests that we've had on our podcast, that it's almost cathartic for people to sit down and talk about some of the things that they've talked about on this podcast. There's something comforting, and it's almost therapy to sit here, put on headphones, have a glass of whiskey, and tell your story, let it out. So if you want to talk about health and wellness, I think podcasting is right up there for us.
I like it. And just as a disclaimer for the listeners today, it is 10 a.m. on a Saturday, and we are not, I repeat, not drinking whiskey. So Jerry, I hope you heard that, Jerry. So I wanted to, I know that you're really into health and wellness, and I just wanted to get a little bit of your background. You're a 12-year veteran of the Chicago Fire Department. Am I correct?
This is correct. I've been with the city for 12 years. I am assigned to a firehouse that's out on Chicago's west side. So as you can imagine, it's a busy company. We'll average 20 runs a day.
Well, and I know that's something that you and I talked about briefly when I was leaving the studio last time. We talked about sleep and the importance of sleep. And actually, we talked about a lot of things. And we truly connected, which I think is important. I tell people, networking is the equivalent of throwing business cards at each other, whereas connecting is truly creating some sort of common ground in a relationship. So I'm really grateful that we stayed in contact. And I'm also grateful that I simply reached out to ask you a question, because I was going to do the DIY. I know. I was going to do the DIY podcast because I've heard it over and over again. My friend Chris Morella from Fourth Shift Fitness told me I needed to start a podcast, and that was about 3 years ago. And then Tex from Power Athlete told me I needed to start a podcast, and that was about 2 years ago. And then Vince told me I needed to start a podcast, and that was about 1 year ago.
And Vince didn't take no for an answer.
Vince is relentless, and I like that. But, I think I have some information to share, and I have a unique opportunity. I know probably the coolest people in the world and the preeminent experts in health and wellness, and for some reason they're willing to share with me and to stay in contact with me, so I feel pretty lucky.
Well, if you have valuable information, starting a podcast allows you to cast that wide net and get the people that you wouldn't be able to connect with through traditional means without you physically having to get there. And it allows you to reach a bigger audience than you normally would. And, without that connection that you and I had, we talked about some commonalities, that we knew some mutual people with sleep recovery, and that started that conversation. And then you allowed me to join in on that Zoom conference.
Yes, that was fun.
Yeah, that was great. And it we hadn't spoke for a while, and then you contacted me about a podcast, and that was it.
That was it. It was over.
Yeah.
Well, and my friend Shantae, she's the movement maestro on Instagram. She and I met, I think it was 2015, fast friends. I consider her a true mentor. And Shantae says she's a big Instagram person. And she says, here's the thing, Annette, you don't own that platform. They can do whatever they want. They can just shut that down. And if you don't have your people on an email list or a way to connect with them or a podcast, Shantae also talked to me about the podcast. I don't remember when that was. And so finally, I just thought, you know what? There's people out there doing it that have maybe even less to offer than I do. So why am I not doing it? So here we are.
Yeah. I mean, you never know what will resonate with certain people, right?
And you have to say things more than once. If you say it once, 1% of the people might hear it. And when they hear it, it might not resonate with them. But if you keep saying it, if you keep giving the message, eventually it's going to hit.
And you never know, like, if the time that the first time they're listening to, they're not receptive, they may not be concentrating on what you have to say. The second time, maybe, but by the time you get to the fourth and fifth time, it's been so reinforced that now their brain actually, by default, starts to absorb that information.
Like when people tell me I should start a podcast.
Yeah, look, how many times did that take before we got you here sitting down in front of this microphone? It's been a long time coming.
I know. Well, I don't want to spend the whole day talking about me. I want to talk a little bit about you.
Well, before we talk about me, though, I'm going to turn the script around on you and ask you, why now? What is it that you want to offer with this podcast? Why are you putting this out now?
That is an excellent question. And I have about a little more than 18 months left in my fire service career. And then I will be retiring and running fire rescue wellness full time. And so what I want people to take away from this is the so what, now what? People and entities inundate us with information all the time. Everything from research articles to CNN to the magazines at the check stand to people coming in and talking to us at the fire department. We are inundated with information, but very rarely are we told what to do with that information. And so on the Fire Rescue Wellness podcast, I'm hoping to give the message of here's the so what, and now what do you do with it? And so the format is going to be hopefully a shorter format, somewhere between a half hour and an hour at the most. And I'm going to have guests who either are professionals who work directly with firefighters. So on an upcoming episode, I'm going to have Megan Lautz, who's the rescue RD. She is an embedded civilian with Fairfax County Fire. And so we're going to have a short episode with Megan for the firefighters where she gives them nutritional, actionable tips and tricks for nutrition. And then we're going to turn it around and have Megan talk directly to the professionals who may want to work in fire. And so we're going to I'm not trying to be Joe Rogan here. I don't need you to invest a week in listening to one episode of my podcast. We're going to try to keep it a little bit shorter and a little bit more digestible and with a really strong take-home message.
Okay. Well, I want to make sure that you have all the tools to get these messages out. And other than that, what's in store for this podcast? I know you want to, bring health and wellness to the fire service, but what does that entail? This isn't all just physical stuff. This is resiliency and mental health and stuff like that. You're really covering a lot of ground here, right?
I'm hoping to cover most of the bases, if not all of the bases. And so sleep, which I think is the most important aspect, and nutrition, mental health, mindfulness, movement, and even, organization. How do you organize these things in your life, and how do you prioritize these things in your life? So I also, fun fact, something I haven't really announced to many people yet, is I was recently named to the AFFI Resiliency Committee, which is a brand new committee that was just formed at the last convention in July. I believe it was in July. I'm already losing track of time. But President Joe Galley from Elgin came up with this wonderful idea of the Resiliency Committee, and his resolution passed. And so I think there's 15 of us that are on the committee now that are really going to work on mental health, physical health, and resiliency with our firefighters in Illinois.
And, you kind of touched upon what resiliency means, but to the average person on the street, resiliency encompasses mental health, physical health, and what else is resiliency?
For me, resiliency, another word that you can substitute is durability. And that's, emotional, spiritual, financial, mental, physical, all of those things put together into a package that makes you be able to show up every day as your very best self.
So resiliency, durability, and just well-being.
Absolutely. And the great news is, if you're not feeling so resilient right now, you can work on it. There's things you can do today, tomorrow, and the next day to make yourself more resilient. Very important in this career.
Well, I do think it's one of the most understated things about the fire service and first responders in general is, we put so much emphasis on training and the physical work that it goes to fight a fire, to take an EMS run. We go through, so much continued education for EMS and fire training, but we don't do anything to work from the inside out, like taking care of the members first as a person, not as a fire service.
I agree 100%. And I just returned from the NSCA Tactical Annual Training. I just got back last night. And what you were saying really made me remember the keynote speaker, Chief Neil Gang. He's a police chief, retired, I believe. He had a slide up, and I don't know if this is his own quote or if it was someone else's, but he said, the public outsources all of their trauma to public safety. And we have to remember that every day that we go to work, we are absorbing and taking in the trauma from everyone else. And so we have to remember that we need to find a way to buffer that, to soften that, to care for ourselves so that we can continue to show up in good shape for our public.
Well, what about, the old school mentality of walk it off, you're a pussy if this bothers you or this scares you? I imagine that that's one of the biggest fights. And I think within the past several years that we've been doing a really good job to break down that stereotype of if you need help. So you wanted to talk to me about me earlier. I am currently detailed to the fire academy. And when the candidates come in, I make it very I make sure that I give the candidates the speech about mental health, and especially part of their candidacy, especially when they're going through their EMT training, because in the Chicago Fire Department, you spend 3 months doing your EMT training, and then you do the next 3 months at the Quinn Fire Academy doing your fire training. And part of your EMT training is you're going to do ride time in Chicago Fire Department ambulance, which, as everybody knows, you're going to see a lot. Okay, to put it lightly, you're going to see a lot of stuff. And so I feel if I'm taking the time to train them and prepare them for their career, it's short-sighted of me to not prepare them mentally for what's out there. Because keep in mind, when these guys come into the fire academy, we're getting electricians, plumbers, butchers. Maybe this guy was working at a golf course, or nowadays we're having a lot of people come in with MBAs. And this, what they're going to encounter on their first day on the ambulance doing their ride time is things they're getting a peek behind the curtain that they'll never be able to unsee. And you know that as well as anybody. So I tell them, and people have heard me say this on our podcast many times, if you were to hurt yourself at a fire, let's say you broke your leg, I would never tell you, Annette, go walk it off. You're going to be fine. Don't be a pussy, right? What would we do? We would take you to the hospital. We would have you see a professional doctor. We would get you healed up. You would go through rehab. You would get yourself better. And when you were well enough, and then we would give you some kind of functional capacity test and make sure that you were physically able to come back and do the job as you were before, right? It has to be the same with mental health. If you are not feeling right mentally, we need to get you professional help. We need to get you fixed. We need to put you through some sort of rehab to get your mind back to where it was, whether, that's you've come to terms with it. A professional has made you see things differently or put things in perspective. And then, and only then, should you come back to doing that job. Because here's worst case scenario. You have a run that is the most horrible run that you've ever seen. You're messed up mentally. The very next run, which could very well happen, and it does on many times in our profession, very next run is just as horrible, right? So now I've taken your shattered leg, told you to walk it off, go there, and now I break the other leg. And then maybe the next run, I break your arm, and then a metaphor for your mental health. It doesn't make sense when you start using your physical body as opposed to your mental body, then it just doesn't make sense.
That is a great analogy, and I love that you're educating those people at the Fire Academy, and that's something we're doing at my department currently as well, and it's very, very important because no one told me prior to the fire service.
You weren't supposed to be weak.
No, you have to be
strong. It was
strong.
A sign of weakness, right? It
was a sign of weakness.
And I tell these guys, you're not weak. I feel that it resonates more if I make what I'm telling them relatable. I tell them I have these feelings all the time. I am overwhelmed all the time. Yeah, I have 12 years on the job, and still to this day, I see things that bother me. It doesn't make me weak, but if it's just talking to your buddy, talking to a guy at your house, maybe that's all you need. But you got to start moving forward to feeling better. This era of us compartmentalizing our problems and letting that build and build and build, we need to stop that, because that's how we're getting in trouble. And we've been losing people at a ridiculous rate lately. And I don't know what to attribute that to, but in our community, police, fire, EMS, we're losing people at a tremendous rate.
And I think that we're going to turn that around. I think we're going to turn that around with that education piece and with that relating piece. Megan Young, who's a legendary strength and conditioning coach, every time she meets you, first of all, she almost breaks her hand because, she is one strong lady. But she says, tell me your story. Don't leave anything out. And by that, she means don't leave out the bad shit. I want to hear that all too, because that's what makes you you. And so by telling our stories, we become relatable, and then someone might be able to share their story too. I think that's important.
Well, and if you're out there in some type of leadership position or an instructor where it's easy for a leader, a chief, captain, somebody of some type of authority and you're trying to get this message through people, there's a difference between saying, all right, if you're not feeling good, go talk to somebody, as opposed to, I've done the same thing. If you need just to talk, come talk to me. My door is always open. You can talk to me. If I can't figure out how to help you, I will find out how to help you, I promise. And I think that's a much better approach than the boss going out there being like, all right, you guys see something that's terrible, that's bothering you, go talk to somebody. We have, IAP or whatever it is that your department offers. But I think that we need to do a better job of putting ourselves out there for the people that we're trying to help. We have to do that.
And as you were speaking, the analogy came to my mind too, is that many departments are saying our people can work out on duty when their lieutenant says it's okay, or when they have time, quote unquote. But that is not the same thing as carving out time. So we do this with our mental health, and we also do it with our physical health. So we have to prioritize exactly what you're saying. My door is open. I am ready, willing, and able to help. And we provide time for our employees for their mental and physical health. Absolutely. So I know you gave me some really exciting news a couple months ago about a personal endeavor that you have going on. Tell me all about it. Let's hear it.
Well, it's funny because the two are linked, the podcast, and I took my partners here at the studio and the podcast, and an opportunity came up for the purchase of the CrossFit gym, which I work out at. And the same way as I bullied you into starting your old podcast, I grabbed my guys and I said, hey, we're buying a CrossFit gym.
We're doing it.
Right. It wasn't, hey, you guys want to? I said, we're moving from the podcast world and we're adding another layer to our business, and we're getting into CrossFit. And it's a perfect marriage, especially if you want to talk about mental health. I have to 100% put out there that our mental health is directly connected to our physical health. There are days where I can't make the workout or whatever, and it is so noticeable, my mental well-being. I'm not the same. I need that physical, and I don't know if it's the release of hormones or whatever else is going on, like chemically in your body, but it is so palatable, the difference when you can go work out, how much better you feel mentally just by doing something physical for that day.
I agree. And just to make this come full circle, my new motto in my life is #FAFO, F around and find out. And I think Vince is the original F around and find out guy. We're going to start a studio. Now we're going to start a CrossFit gym. I don't know what's next on the horizon for him, but keep your eyes open because this guy's going places.
Well, if anybody out there, try it. If you haven't worked out in a while and you're, maybe you're mentally fatigued or you're just, out of sorts, go to that gym, work out, just give it a try. Get on the treadmill, just walk, do something, go for a walk, do something and see how you feel after that. If you don't feel better, then we'll work on something else. But that is a great place to start.
Well, I'm going to have to put my stamp of endorsement on that too. And also, in keeping with my promise of keeping these episodes a little bit short, we're going to start wrapping up. But one message I would like to send home to my audience, not only #FAFO, but also when you want to do something, find somebody that's an expert in the field and then get their advice and follow what they're saying, because that's how you're truly going to be successful. You can dabble all you want, but, find someone to be an expert to lead you. So Vince, tell the people, how can they get a hold of you?
Well, I'm you beat me to the punch. I didn't want to be the guy to go out and give all the advice about reaching out to somebody. If you just need to reach out to somebody and talk to somebody, you can reach out to me. You can get a hold of me. Send me a message at vince@chicagosbravest.com. I promise 100% I will get back to you. I will not leave you out there. I will contact you. Vince@chicagosbravest.com. Send me a message. Let me know what you need.
Absolutely. And then have you got some social media links for everyone?
Yeah, if you can find us at Chicago's Bravest on Instagram and Facebook. We are easily found. Our podcast is available on Spotify, iTunes, wherever you listen to podcasts. So check us out. There's some amazing stories. You don't have to tune in to listen to me, but you need to listen to some of the people we have on for sure.
I love it, and we will make sure that all of that information is in the show notes for you. This has been AZ and
Vince from Chicago's Bravest Stories
with my very first podcast episode. Thank you, Vince.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Look forward to hearing more.